Hey everybody, Jace Line here with Skills and Drills Baseball Training, and I'm right back here on the couch with another informative episode of On the Ball. Now I hope you checked out my previous two episodes. In the first one, I talked about everything you need to look for in your glove to make sure it's at its highest potential when the season comes. In the second episode, I talked about everything you would ever need to know about a grip and how you can use those to maximize both your speed and your accuracy. So now that we have the glove and we have the grip, it makes the most sense to move on with some of the throwing mechanics. And in today's episode, I'm talking about the alignment and how we can use that to maximize our speed and our accuracy. So this is really important for all pitchers and position players. So before we actually jump into the main part of this video, I want to take a minute or two to talk about something that I think is going to be a really serious issue with a whole lot of players this season. And so if you take anything out of this video, make sure that this is it. I want you to heed my warning. I think this year is going to be the season of the sore arm. And obviously, if you've played the game long enough, you struggled with a sore arm. Whether you've just overdone it and thrown too much in the course of a week, or maybe you tweaked something in a game and it just won't fully heal, or you're throwing with improper form and mechanics. Everyone struggles with a sore arm every now and again. That being said, I think this year it's going to be magnified, and I think it's going to be across the board, all age groups. And if you really think about it, this April time frame, most people are throwing 5 days a week right now. Like, excluding the whole pandemic thing, you'd be throwing 5 days a week. High school kids, you either got practice or a game Monday through Friday. Even if it rains, you're indoors throwing. Doesn't mean you're throwing hard, but you're going through the warm-up, you're throwing infield, you might be throwing a light bullpen session. You are throwing 5 days a week, and you're building up, you're getting in shape, you're building up that muscle, and you're also increasing your speed, which is important for increasing your speed every year. If you're a younger player right now, you'd probably be training 1 day a week. You'd probably have 2 tournament practices, and the in-house teams, the second the weather breaks, they'd be calling. So you'd either have, either 2 practices or another practice in a game. So you'd be throwing 5 days a week. And right now, I think there's a lot of people saying, I don't have practice, I don't have games. No one's really calling me out to the field, so I'm not throwing. And now all of a sudden, you guys know it as well as I do, what's going to happen is this whole thing's going to blow over, the weather's going to be perfect, those coaches are going to get on the phone, and it's going to be baseball crazy. That tournament team's going to want 3 practices, they have a tournament this upcoming weekend, in-house, that season's going to be accelerated, so they're going to be trying to get in, who knows, 3 games a week, maybe more, to try to, make up for the gap that they lost early on. So it's going to be nothing, everything all at once. And if you're not throwing right now, your arm is going to feel it. It takes a long time to get in shape. It takes the majority of the winter, especially if you're a high school kid, it takes the majority of the winter of that gradual build so you hit that season at your apex. And that's what I want to make sure everyone does. I don't want you to sit around and, I love baseball as much as the next guy, and we're all bored, and we all want it back. I don't want you guys sitting around saying, man, I wish baseball was here. Man, I wish baseball was here. All of a sudden, you get your opportunity, you're ready to get on the diamond, and 2 weeks in, you got arm trouble, and the rest of the year is shot. And not only that, if you wait until that season comes to actually start throwing, you're losing a big chunk of time right now to add speed, which every year we should be trying to add a couple mile an hour to our throwing motion. So whenever you get into high school, you have that pop that's going to catch the scout's eye, and you're going to get those opportunities later on. So regardless of the form mechanics, make sure you're working throwing in to your weekly regimen. It does not have to be hard. This is the perfect example. This is the perfect opportunity to buy one of those half moon nets, throw in your basement, throw in your garage. If it's nice out, throw with your dad, throw with your brother, someone that you're already quarantined with. Just throw it out into an open field. I don't care. Whatever you have to do to make sure the arms are getting the reps. Like I said, don't be throwing hard consistently, but make sure your arms are getting your reps, they're staying in shape, so when you hit your diamond, you're at your apex, and you're ready to play. Now that you've heard my warning, I'll jump down off my soapbox here, and we'll move on with today's video, which is alignment in the throwing process. So to start off, I'll be showing and explaining exactly what proper alignment is. I'll then kind of explain how if you're out of that alignment, how it's affecting both your speed and your accuracy. And at the end, I'm going to do some math to show you just how small your margin for error really is in your alignment. So let's jump right into it. First, let me start off by explaining exactly what I mean when I say the word alignment. So as a player delivers a baseball, his body should both start and finish on an imaginary line directly through the center of his target. Now I know that sounds incredibly easy, but you'd be surprised just how many players struggle with this. In fact, in all my years of training, I seriously can't think of a single player that's come to me that didn't need help with their alignment. So it just seems like something that every single player struggles with, myself included, and I figured it's important enough to make a video about. Now, there's a lot of ways that improper throwing mechanics can influence your alignment, But without question, where most players struggle is during their stride. And when I say the word stride, I'm talking about whenever they take the step with their front foot towards the target. As I previously mentioned, it's important to maintain alignment throughout the entirety of the throwing process. So that being said, how you start is just as important as how you finish. So let's go back to where a player would start his stride from, and let's talk about what exactly I would be looking for in terms of alignment, or what I would define as proper alignment from the start of the stride. So for the purposes of today's video, let's imagine I'm the player throwing to you, and I would be in what's considered the stretch position, or starting from the side. Now there's three elements of what I would look for when it comes to alignment from the stretch position. And those elements are the toes, the hips, and the shoulders being perfectly in line directly with who I'm throwing at. So to better illustrate where a player should start his stride from, let's imagine that you and I were actually playing a game of catch. So if that were the case, this is the position that I would start my stride from. As you can see, there's a line straight through my toes, straight through the hips, and straight through the shoulders. And really from this position, you need to be focused on the front foot, because no matter where that front foot goes, it pulls my hips and my shoulders with it. So that front foot has to be on the center line, and that'll put my hips and my shoulders right through the center of my target. So let's talk about how starting your stride out of alignment can be affecting both your speed and your accuracy. So from an accuracy standpoint, it's super important that my entire body stays on that imaginary center line straight back through my target. That increases the odds that the ball stays on that center line through the target. So if you can see, if my front foot starts on either side of that imaginary line, whether I'm open or closed, my hips have to make this big swinging motion when I stride. And that swinging motion takes incredible timing in order for that player to land directly on center. So what we see a lot of the time is as that swinging motion starts, those players land super open or super closed from that center line, and that is going to directly affect their accuracy downrange, because now their alignment is way off center in either case, way off the center of the target. So I want to start in the center to be able to maintain that center for accuracy downrange. But not only that, I want to use my body speed to increase the speed of the baseball. Now again, if I'm swinging, a lot of that body momentum is going left and right. It's not going to the target, and therefore the ball is not gaining any speed to the target. So again, when I start in alignment and I stride to alignment, now my body can gain 2, 3, 4 mile an hour down a mound, and when my body gains 2, 3, 4 mile an hour straight in line, the ball gains 2 to 3, 4 mile an hour straight in line, and that increases your speed, where if I'm coming left and right, that ball is not generating any speed towards the target. So that's extremely important for all pitchers and position players. So now that we have you focused on how you start your stride, you need to be equally focused on how you finish your stride, meaning when your front foot actually contacts the ground. That also needs to be in a line with the center line through your target. So just like we focused on the toes, hips, and shoulders at the beginning, we're going to focus on the toes, hips, and shoulders as that front hip or as that front foot contacts the ground. So as you can see, that stride should finish in a location like this. There's a line through my toes straight at the camera, through my hips straight at the camera, and through my shoulders straight back at the camera. Now let's talk about why it's so important that my stride also lands with alignment through my toes, hips, and my shoulders. And we briefly talked about some of this before where, yeah, I want as much momentum as I can straight at the target to generate speed. As long as my body's moving straight at the target, there's a higher chance that the ball will go straight to the target. Those are important. But I think the most important aspect of landing in alignment is from generating proper hip drive. Now, if you've ever watched a professional, like an MLB pitcher throwing in slow motion or an MLB hitter hitting in slow motion, both of those players have one thing in common, and that's they're generating rotation through hip drive. And that rotation is coming from the toes up to the hips, up to the shoulders. And that's why it's so important that all those are in alignment so they can all work in unison together to generate the most power. And in throwing, the proper rotation will also help you get back to being the most accurate. So let's talk about how if I land out of alignment, how that's affecting my hip drive and how that'll affect both my power and my accuracy. So let's imagine a player's landing in the open position. Again, his hips are open and his chest is open towards his target. So from this position, if you look at that hip drive, how much rotation am I actually creating in my hips and my upper body? As compared to landing in alignment, little to none. Here I'm getting a full 90-degree rotation. If I land open, I'm almost not turning at all, especially at my shoulders. So if you can imagine, less of my body is a part of this motion, and therefore less muscle is involved, and therefore less power is involved as compared to landing in perfect alignment and being able to rotate. Not only that, so that affects the speed, but not only that, how is it affecting my accuracy? When I can't fully rotate and get around back square to a target, now I pretty much just have to aim my hand and hopefully find center with my fingers. That's much harder than landing in alignment, getting full rotation. Now my elbow is right back to the center, and I can easily stay on that imaginary center line to the target, and the ball lands on the center line. Now conversely, let's imagine the player lands closed. His hip and his chest are closed off from the target. Now this player obviously has to rotate a whole lot farther. So you think, wow, this guy's generating a whole lot of power. But what you're not realizing is at the end of that rotation, he has to fight against this front hip, something fierce. And this front hip, it's fighting against the rotation, so it's actually slowing that rotation down right as he goes to release the ball. So even though you think he's rotating more, so he's going to generate more speed, this is actually acting as a braking mechanism on his rotation, slowing it down. Not only that, but when you land closed, as you rotate, it's way harder to get that hand back to center. You really, really have to fight against it. And over a number of throws, that player is going to tire out, and eventually he'll never be able to get back to center. So he's going to be much slower and less accurate, as opposed to landing through the toes, hips, and shoulders in perfect alignment. I get a full 90-degree rotation. I'm straight back to center, and that's going to be able to maximize my speed and my accuracy just by how I land my stride. So now that you know how important it is that your stride stays in alignment from start to finish, it's time for you to practice at home. And the easiest way that I know how to do that is by finding or creating a simple line on your floor. Now in this case, I just brought out a floor mat onto the carpet, and I'm going to use the edge of that floor mat as a visual cue to make sure my stride is in alignment all the way to the finish. If you don't happen to have a floor mat to use, another option that might be in your house would be where your flooring transitions from a wood floor to carpeting, or you might be able to use the grouting in a vinyl floor or a tile floor. If you don't have any of those options inside your house, you might have to get creative, or you could go outside and you could use something as simple as sidewalk chalk. As long as you use a straight edge and make sure that line's super straight, you can go outside on those nice days and make sure your stride is in perfect alignment. So now that we have the line on the floor, let's talk about how we can use that to improve our alignment from home. So first, I just want to practice starting from an aligned position. So what I'm asking that player to do is to bring both of his toes right to the edge of whatever line he's using. His feet should be about shoulder width apart. Hand goes into the glove. You start in an athletic position, and I just want you to get used to what it feels like to have your toes, hips, and shoulders in line with the target. Once you have that down, let's move on to the actual striding motion. And as you stride, I'm looking for that front foot to land in perfect alignment with the back foot. The easiest way to start learning this is to actually look at the line as you're striding. That will help to strengthen the muscle memory. And you want to do this rep after rep, maybe do this for 5 minutes a day. Do this on commercial breaks. If you have a floor mat in your living room, you can do this on commercial breaks, just looking at the line and striding out, trying to get those toes to stay in perfect alignment as you move. Once you think you got it down pretty well from looking at the line, now you want to practice looking up at your imaginary target. And this is where it becomes extremely difficult, and you'll notice you're not as good as you think. So I want to look up at my target, boom, try to land right on the edge of that line, the best that I can. And over time, it'll get easier and easier and easier. And in this next segment here, I'm going to do some math and show you just how precise you need to be with that front foot in order to be as accurate as possible. All right, so let's do some baseball math. Now, what we're trying to figure out here is just how much a player's accuracy is affected downrange when his stride lands out of alignment. So I figured since we're talking about accuracy, it'd probably be best to use pitching as an example. So just so we're on the same page and we're all looking at the same thing here, this is the pitching rubber. So that would be on the mound. As you can see at the other end, here's home plate. And let's imagine this scenario that this pitcher is trying to throw a fastball right down the center of home plate. So this is that pitcher's aiming point, and therefore this would be perfect alignment of that pitcher's stride. His stride should land right on that imaginary line of his aiming point. But since we're showing the pitcher that lands out of alignment, how much that affects accuracy, that won't be the case in this scenario. So let's jump into this pitcher's stride. In order to show you his stride, I'm going to draw circles for that pitcher's feet. Okay, so it's going to look something like this. As that pitcher goes to deliver the ball, he strides out Here's his back foot still in contact with the rubber, and here's his front foot. As you can see, that is not on that imaginary center line of his aiming point. So that stride is out of alignment. Now, obviously, I don't have a picture here, so I'm going to have to kind of make up the numbers as I go. So let's imagine that this stride length, or the distance between the pitcher's feet, is 5 feet long. And I'm going to have to use inches later on, so I'm just going to convert that now. So 5 feet or 60 inches. So this pitcher strides out to deliver the ball down the center of the plate, but his stride is out of alignment, and it's 60 inches long. Now let's say that this pitcher lands, I don't know, how far does he land out of alignment? Let's say 1 inch. Okay, so pitcher goes to deliver the ball, his stride length is 60 inches, and he lands 1 inch out of that imaginary line of his aiming point and where his stride alignment should be. So now, if that pitcher's throwing with proper mechanics and he's using the full hip drive, when his hips come around, his elbow will eventually come in perfect alignment with his front foot. And that will send the ball on a trajectory something similar to this. Obviously, this is not at scale here. But that ball is going to follow, essentially, whatever angle is made from his aiming point to his front foot. So it's going to follow the trajectory of this angle. So in order to figure out where this ball actually ends up and figure out how much it's actually affected his accuracy, we have to solve for this angle here. And I'm going to call this angle theta. That's going to be the variable for that angle. So now, how do I figure this out? Well, if you look closely here, I have what's known as a 90-degree triangle, which means I can use trigonometric functions to solve for this. So let's see, what all do I have in this triangle? So just so we know here, we have the triangle here. Here's one leg of the triangle, the vertical leg of the triangle, and then the hypotenuse of the triangle. So based off of this angle, I have the opposite side, and I have the hypotenuse. So I have enough to solve for this angle if I use the sine function, which is opposite over hypotenuse. So we'll say sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse, 1 divided by 60. So now I have to figure out how to get this angle on its own. That's what I'm solving for. So I have to get rid of this sine. So I'm going to take the inverse sine, which these will cancel, and that'll bring inverse sine over here. So we'll have theta equals inverse sine of 1 over 60. So now, get on my calculator, and I'll solve for theta. So inverse sine of 1 divided by 60, I don't know how well you can see that, 0.9549. We'll take it out to 4 decimal places. So theta equals 0.9549 degrees. So we'll write this up here so we can erase the rest. Equals 0.9549 degrees. So that's not even a degree, but we'll see how much that actually affects his accuracy downrange. So again, pitcher strides out 5 feet long. He misses that alignment by only an inch, and that sets the angle from his alignment to his actual stride of 0.9549 degrees. And that's going to be the angle that that ball is following. So now I have to figure out how much it's actually affected his accuracy downrange at the front of the plate. So in order to do that, I have to figure out how far this ball has traveled. Well, I know on a professional diamond, from the front of the rubber to the back of the plate is 60 feet, 6 inches. So that's 60 and a half feet. So 60 times 12 is 720, plus the extra 6 inches is 726 inches from the front of the plate, or from the front of the rubber to the back of the plate. So we'll write 726 inches. Now, I know the length of this plate, because really what I want to figure out is where the ball crosses the plate, or starts to cross the plate, because that's going to tell me if it's a ball or a strike. So let's say, so I know that the length of the plate is 17 inches. So I know the overall distance is 726. I need to subtract that 17 inches to figure out where the ball is as it starts to cross the face of the plate. So subtract 17 equals 709 inches. So that means from the front of the rubber to the front of the plate, this distance here is 709 inches. That's the distance that the ball is traveling. So now, in order to figure out how much it's affected his accuracy, I need to figure out this distance here from the center line. So again, if you look closely, we have another larger right triangle here. So here's the right angle in the triangle. So it still keeps the same angle, so we're going to be able to use that to solve for whatever this distance is. I'm going to call this distance x. That's the distance that the ball deviates from the center line or his aiming point to where it's actually going to land. So let's see. If this is the angle I'm using, I have opposite and I have adjacent, which means I can use tangent. Tangent equals opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to write tangent theta equals opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 709. So now let's see what we have. I need to figure out how to get this x on its own, which means if I multiply both sides by 709, these will cancel, and I'll have 709 times tangent of theta, which I'll just put that in. We already know theta is 0.9549, 0.9549 equals x. So that's going to give us the distance that actually affects the pitcher's accuracy. Let's figure this out. So tangent of 0.9549, and we're going to take that number, we're going to multiply it by 709 inches. That's the distance the ball travels, and we're going to get 11.81 inches. So x equals 11.81 inches. We'll write this up here. So, what all does this mean? Let's erase this quick, and then we'll recap. So, pitcher's trying to throw a fastball right down the center of the plate. He strides out and lands that stride at a distance of 5 feet. His stride length is 5 feet and 1 inch from the aiming point, or where perfect alignment would be. That sets both his hips and thus the ball on an angle of 0.9549 degrees if he's throwing in proper mechanics. That ball travels a distance of 709 inches from the front of the rubber to the front of the plate. And when that happens, it lands 11.81 inches wide of the center line. So as you can see, just by missing by 1 inch off of his alignment, it's affected his overall accuracy 11.81 inches wide of his aiming point. So that's actually extremely significant if you really think about it over a short distance. 60 feet on a baseball diamond is not all that much. Now, let's actually see if this pitcher threw a ball or a strike, because that's really what it's coming down to here. So, I know that the width of this plate from edge to edge is 17 inches. So in order to figure out if this ball landed between the center and the edge, that's only half of that overall distance, right? Between the center and this edge, if this overall distance is 17 inches, this is only half of the entire width of that plate. So let's take 17 inches, divide it by 2, and that's going to give me 8.5 inches. So the distance from the center of the plate to the edge of the plate is 8.5 inches. As you can see, he's already gone 11.81 inches, so this is definitely going to be a ball. Let's see how wide off of the edge of the plate this ball is actually going to land. So 11.81 inches, and I'm going to subtract the 8.5. 11.81, subtract 8.5, and that's going to give me 3.31 inches equals 3.31 inches wide. So just by missing his stride by 1 inch off of alignment, that's going to send a ball wide of the strike zone 3.31 inches. Now, this doesn't only affect pitchers, this also affects position players, and it gets, in some scenarios, it can get even worse. Let's imagine I'm an outfielder. So not only am I throwing this only, whatever the case might be, this 709 inches, I'm actually throwing 100 feet now. Let's say from the outfield into second base, I'm throwing into a tagging play. As this distance lengthens and we come longer out here, the ball continues to follow this angle and continues to become wider and wider from its original aiming point. So as the distance is lengthened, it also misses by a wider margin. Now, not only that, but a shorter stride will affect this. Let's say I'm not striding the full 5 feet. Let's say I'm only getting 4 feet out of it, but I'm also landing at the same 1 inch displacement from the line. So that leg of the triangle would be out here. That's a steeper angle, so that ball is going to continue to follow the steeper angle and actually fall farther off target. So the shorter the stride would be from this, I guess what I'm saying is the shorter your stride, if you only miss by an inch, you're going to miss by a whole lot more than 11.81 inches at the actual front of the plate. Or if you're throwing a longer distance with this same displacement, it's also going to be a lot farther wide of your center line than 11.81 inches. So as you can see there, I'm not a math teacher. I hope I did a decent enough job explaining it. If nothing else, you can kind of visualize off of this drawing here just how much that angle is going to actually affect where your ball ends up. All right, guys, well, that's all I have for you today. As always, I hope everybody learned something. If you like this material, give me a like. If you want to help me reach as many players, parents, and coaches as possible, please give this post a share. And remember to always stay positive, stay healthy, and stay on the ball. We'll see you next time.